We'll move on to the next topic. So again, talking about pressure and talking about players and teams that are under the pump. Who do you feel is under the most pressure heading into the postseason? You can list both your teams and your players. Yeah. They don't have to be from the same team. They don't have to be from the same organisation. Yeah. We don't have to have the same agreement here, obviously. So I guess I'll let you take it away, Marcus. Let me know who you have as your players and teams under the most pressure.
So I'll keep this one pretty short and sweet. But teams under the pump come playoff time for me. I'll give a little bit of an explanation, but not too much. So for teams, I have the Miami Heat. Reason being, they've made the finals in 2020, but they haven't really been able to get back to that form that they had. And Tyler Hero obviously is a young prospect, and Bam Adebayo's great, but Jimmy's kind of getting old. And I don't really know if they have the team to compete in the East. In fact, I don't think they do. So I think they're under the pump. I got the Nuggets under the pump because, we've seen the amount of first, second round exits that Nikola Jokic has had, and he has Jamal Murray and Michael Porter back. So I rate Denver, but I know a lot of people might necessarily think that they're pretenders. I'm not going to lie. Specifically, Philadelphia fans, with the whole, Joel, blah, blah, blah. Can we just appreciate both for once, please? Nikola and Embiid,
100%.
Both great. But the next team is actually Philadelphia. Look, you got Joel Embiid, potential MVP, likely MVP. Then you got James Harden, who the reason they're under the pump is because of health reasons. Look, Harden and Embiid, they don't have a great track record in the playoffs of being healthy. So if they can't stay healthy this year and they don't reach the Eastern Conference Finals, I'll say, I think they could be under the pump. I think Harden might not be a Sixer. I think they could be under the pump. And my next team and final team is the Atlanta Hawks. Look, they might sneak into the playoffs, but the DeJounte Murray acquisition, he's been playing great, but I don't know if the fit's great next to Trae Young. I don't know who's the real alpha on that team. I don't know if they can coexist well. John Collins has obviously dropped off. He should be traded, I think, in the offseason, or if he's a free agent, I think he should leave. And talking about Dallas before, I think that could be a good fit next to Luka as a pick and roll partner. And I like that. I rate him over, bloody Dwight Powell, who I don't rate him at all. So I think John...
How is he still a starting center? We'll never know.
Exactly. How's he... Yeah, exactly. I think John Collins is double the player that Dwight is and Dwight Powell. And, the fact that this John Collins guy, he averaged like 20 and 10 not too long ago. So he could easily, he's still a valuable asset. So anyway, enough with John Collins. I love him, but we got to move on. So yeah, my players, Harden, Embiid, Trae Young, and then one last one, Russell Westbrook. He played great today. If he brings it every night, you don't have to worry about it. But if he underperforms in the playoffs and he's to blame, which I'm not one to kind of blame Russell Westbrook, but say he plays horrific in the playoffs and the Clippers get eliminated in a 7-game series to the, who knows, any team that's worse than, for example, Dallas or something, I think Westbrook could be under the pump because, fit-wise, who's going to be willing to take him on? Is he a starter? Is he a bench player? We don't really know. So that's my teams and players also who I think are under the pump.
Fair assessment. I like it. You weren't too full on with it, but I think the analysis was good there. For me, personally, just touching on that whole John Collins thing, I want to know how many off-seasons and trade rumours
oh my God,
we've heard with
how long
John
do we
Collins.
have to wait?
And the fact that he's still there, it just blows my mind.
It's funny, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think, you made a fair point there with, obviously, the Atlanta Hawks. I think getting a coach like Quinn Snyder, even though obviously Nate McMillan helped take them to the conference
They
finals
should.
a few years ago. I don't think they should have been there in the first place if Ben makes that dunk. But again, with Quinn Snyder's experience in the playoffs, he didn't take him to any particular promised land or anything like that, but I do think he has that coaching experience, and I think hopefully if they do sneak in, he can maybe provide that spark defensively, especially in the playoffs when the game slows down a bit. He's obviously a defensive-minded coach, so that might make the difference. But again, not knowing who the alpha is on that team, and DeJounte having a bit of an ego personality, and them giving up all those picks for DeJounte, they are under a bit of pressure in my opinion. But they're not. It's not one of the teams I've listed. But again, obviously it is a fair call to make. For me, I think the team that's under the most pressure is really the Phoenix Suns. You look at how many players they gave up to acquire Kevin Durant, and obviously since that trade, you look at what Mikal Bridges has put up in terms of productivity. In his 21 games for the Nets in his career, he's averaging 26.8 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 2.7 assists. I don't have his shooting splits, but again, knowing the way Mikal Bridges is as a player, he'd be pretty efficient. And if you were to take the most points per game by a Nets player of all time, even though it's a small sample size, he's actually third on that list for a career points per game as a Nets player. So KD's on top at 29, Kyrie's second at 27.1, and Bridges only just misses out on second spot. So again, that could turn out to bite them in the arse. And you saw Cam Johnson, I know it was against the Rockets, but he had 31, 7, and 5 on 61% shooting. And again, guys like that can shoot the ball and that can be pests on the defensive side as well. And the fact that you gave up so many picks through the entire house at the Nets to acquire Kevin Durant, it could turn out to bite them in the arse. And obviously with the fact that now Chris Paul has less pressure on him in terms of having to produce the way he did in the previous playoff appearances, now that you have KD to take up the brunt of that scoring load, I think that puts more pressure on him as well. So I think he's one of the players that's under pressure, and KD as well. I could put Devin Booker in that sense as well, but again, he has delivered to an extent, and he in the playoffs, we saw what he could do on the big stage, and I don't think he really let that team down more than Chris Paul did last playoff series or last playoff appearance that they had. So I think him and Chris Paul and KD are the two players from the Suns that I think are under the pump. Nuggets are one of the other teams that I have, and to go with that, Nikola Jokic, again, not more so from myself, but I just know that the media is going to scrutinize him heavily, especially the fact that he could possibly win his third MVP, and all three of them would be back-to-back-to-back. And so again, if you don't perform now after you get named MVP and you have another first, second round exit like you mentioned, I don't think it's going to bode well with the narrative surrounding Nikola Jokic. And I think, like you said, in previous years we could sort of let him get away with it a bit because, again, he didn't have Michael Porter Jr. healthy, and then last year he didn't have Jamal Murray healthy. So he hasn't had that, and he didn't have Aaron Gordon in the previous series either. So again, you got guys like that, Bruce Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who've had experience in big stages. Again, he has a really deep bench now and a good supporting cast to help him through this playoff run. So if he doesn't have success, I think they're going to come down hard on him. And I love Jokic. I'm Serbian, so again, I'm a big stan as I am with Luka Doncic. But I think they're going to come down heavily on him if he doesn't perform. So I'm hoping he does play well, but he's under a bit of pressure. Like you mentioned, the Sixers are under the pump. James Harden, Joel Embiid, previous playoff failures haven't really reached the levels that guys like that leading teams should reach. And so I think they're under the pump, and I think you mentioned this in the last podcast we had, they might even have to completely rebuild their whole team if they don't have the success that they want in this playoff series. You won't see the same personnel a part of the Sixers next season, so that'll be interesting. And the last team I have, so I got two more teams. I got the Clippers. Obviously, since Kawhi and PG were acquired, they haven't had the success that they've wanted, and the plan that Steve Ballmer had in place when he brought them there, hasn't come to fruition. Now you've brought Westbrook into the picture. PG's health's going to come into play as to whether they have the success that they want. But I think that whole trio usually you could consider them that they're under pressure heading into the postseason. And whether this is a question mark, whether they make it or not.
Big time.
Dallas, I think, is under the pump heading into the postseason because, again, especially Luka and Kyrie, again, that whole thing of how they perform, if they do make the playoffs, play in, etc. If they don't perform, that could mean the difference between them being a duo next season or completely just getting rid of that entire experiment and starting from scratch again and eventuating to Kyrie ending up on a new team. So you could say that's probably my list of players and teams that are probably the highest, have the highest pressure mounted on them. But you could make a case for a lot of different teams and a lot of different players. But I think the way that these guys have been talked about in the media, you could probably say that they're under the most pressure and under the pump the most.